Hey, what's up guys? Node Investor here. Want to bring a quick update. It's been a relatively slow couple of weeks. I haven't really done a whole lot of crypto trading. I've been staying busy trading primarily stocks, a little bit of Forex, but mostly just watching the markets. I'm still doing my daily market scans, keeping an eye out for setups, but for the most part, the market just remains in a holding pattern. We're looking at BTC here. You can see in this little range that it's been in, a relatively small percentage range. If you look at any of the volatility indicators, Bollinger Bands, Keltner channels, those type of things are really starting to tighten up here. The average true range is dropping. And as we know, these periods of low volatility, sideways action generally doesn't last more than a couple of weeks. And so keeping an eye on things, but for the most part, there hasn't been any follow through. The lack of momentum has really been the signature in this market. You look at these big moves, these big wicks that we've seen, and most of them have just been fake outs. They've not seen any follow through. We've not seen any continuation on any of these movements ever since that big drop that we had when Bitcoin failed to get over that 4,100 level. We haven't seen a whole lot of up and down movement that is meaningful. There's been no trends. Initially, I tried to trade this little range here and just got chopped up. After a while, I just said, there's no follow through, there's no movement. I'm just gonna wait this one out. And I've just been waiting it out for the last week and a half and just been sitting tight. Every time I see a big push in one direction or the other, I really have just been taking it with a grain of salt. I don't get anxious or impatient to jump on any particular trade. I'm just waiting to see if it follows through, and so far I've been proven right. It has not followed through and it just drops to the next side and so forth. So until that changes, it's just going to be a waiting game, a game of patience. But like I said, things usually begin to show some movement after a period of quiet, and a lot of these names, a lot of the alts are starting to really tighten up here. And at the end of the day, it's just going to come down to what BTC does here over the next few days or so. But as I mentioned in the last video, the big picture really is the most important thing to be watching. If we look at the weekly chart here, you can see there's just this big range, this consolidation that's happening within the broader downtrend. The moving averages are still heading lower. Prices are starting to get squeezed within this resistance that's approaching to the downside as well as the support. And it's technically forming a little bit of a bear pennant here at the lows, but this could certainly just turn around. If we see a big push higher, then you would have a higher low. And I mentioned that in the last video as to a couple of different scenarios, but in the big picture, you can just see how tight this has been. The last two weekly candles, as I record this, have been very small, very narrow compared to some of the last prior weeks. And so that's really the key to be watching, kind of the bigger picture, the daily charts. I'm not so concerned with these quick 1 hour movements up or down, or even on the 4 hour chart. I want to see some more momentum and a trend to begin to establish itself on a little bit of a larger time frame. Now, it's interesting to note that the Bitcoin ETF was taken off the table, the Van Eck ETF, and the market didn't just have a huge negative reaction to that. There wasn't a little bit of movement initially, but not this all-out bearish tone, everything selling off, as one may have expected a few months back when there was just so much anticipation for that. We know that that was delayed, that was pushed out, and for it to just suddenly come off the table here was a bit of a surprise, but I was more interested to see how the market react, and the fact that it didn't just collapse immediately or have a huge sell-off is actually quite positive, so something to make note of. So going back to the 4 hour chart quickly before we move on to a handful of other names, a couple of key support and resistance levels to be watching. A close below this level here, we did see a shakeout, a quick wick attempt lower, but it quickly moved right back above. But essentially a close below that 3480 continues to be that first support that I'm watching, and on the upside, getting above that 37.25 or so is going to be important. Everything in between there for me is just range bound. I want to see a close out of this range or below that range, and of course if it gets below that, the next big level to be watching are the recent lows that we saw in mid-December. That's 31.30. Above that, of course, that resistance level that was not able to be broken around 4,100, just below 4,100, is going to be the next major level to be watching. So until we're out of this range, those are really the two levels to be watching near term. If we see a big push out, then on the upways, I want to see around that 4,100 level, and on the downside, keep an eye out for that 3,130 level as a key support zone. Now looking at the alts, there have been quite a few names, especially in the smaller cap names, that have just had these big moves out of nowhere, these very large volume double-digit gains, but for the most part, a lot of them just fizzle out. There hasn't been a lot of follow-through. And that's just kind of been the nature of the market here over the last couple of days. We saw waves, we've seen 0x, we've seen a lot of small cap names having these big moves, but hasn't been a lot of follow through. Some of the names I am keeping an eye on here, Litecoin. Watching Litecoin here, we did see that big breakout out of this consolidation here earlier this month, had a nice move higher, and then when Bitcoin dropped, of course, this put the squash on this momentum, but it's been forming this nice rounded kind of consolidation, this saucer base here, which just happens to correspond with the prior breakout point. So it is finding some support there. I'm watching this resistance here, wanting to see if it can push higher. Above that, I'm going to be looking for a retest of these recent highs. So around that 9,900 level is that first target that I'm watching for Litecoin. Next on my list is Ontology, and I've posted this chart on Twitter a few times, and I just continue to extend the lines, adjust them a little bit, but this is just really starting to narrow out, really getting tight. I'd like to see a breakout above, of course, and watching for some confirmation. So moving through this on a close above, I'd be looking for either a pullback, re-entry, or a little bit of a pause, bull flag entry, or an entry right at the moving averages, something along those lines. But if I do see a quick wick higher, I'm going to be patient and wait to see if it's just another fake out or if it's truly going to be the beginning of a move. And of course, if that happens to correspond with some strong action in Bitcoin or some of the other major names, that'll give it a little bit more credibility. But this one's really starting to tighten up, so just keeping an eye on this one here. A break below this level down here would start to negate the pattern, and of course a close above this upper range around 1710 or so is going to be positive. But most importantly, I want to see some volume come in if it does begin to push higher. Another one I'm watching is VeChain. Now this is a little bit more of a trend reversal, a potential low being set, and you can see there's been a clear support level established. And notice the volume that's really been coming in on these recent candles to the upside. That's very strong volume. There's a battle happening here at these lows, really starting to establish a little bit of a support zone, which is positive. This is the daily chart, so this is a little bit more of a longer term chart here after a very long downtrend. Now we did have a little bit of a breakout. You're seeing a pullback right into that breakout point right now, which is holding, and then the next level up on a closing basis is going to be above all of these wicks, which was also the high that we saw here 2 days ago. And so this one's looking pretty good, especially the volume. I like the volume on that push higher. Seeing a little bit of a retest right now, wanting to see some more follow through to the upside after this, but there really is quite a bit of room to run. If some volume starts coming in and this starts to get some momentum, could make for a nice high percentage gainer. So VeChain is on the radar right now. Lower Satoshi value names, so some of these moves are a little bit bigger if you look at the shorter term time frames. Has that choppier look just because of the price point that this one's at, but big picture looks good, as well as a US dollar chart. It's also looking good from that trading. And the last one here is Binance Coin. Now this is BNB versus Tether. So this is the USDT pair. And I did show the Binance BTC pair in the last video, and it's been very strong, a very good uptrend that is still very much in place. But I'm keeping an eye on this Tether pair here just as it approaches this resistance level. You can see it's been trying to break out. It's really starting to narrow and consolidate here near the lows, watching this lower trend line. And so keeping an eye on this. If it breaks out here, you can see that continuation of the uptrend on the BTC pair as well. And above this, again, just like some of these others, there's quite a bit of room to run before the next major resistance point, and so could make for a nice follow through and continuation move if this market can get going a little bit and see a little bit of more momentum. There's a few other names. Link continues to look good. Some of the smaller cap names that have run recently are still holding up well, and so there are some setups shaping up out there, but all around the market is just not seeing any follow through yet. A lot of these breakouts are just fizzling out, and so I'm going to continue to remain patient until we see a little bit more strength, a little bit more follow through, but always just keeping an eye on the charts, watching these setups develop and being ready for when we do get to see some more movement, and hopefully it's to the upside. The overall coin market cap remains around the same $120 billion mark. BTC dominance still around that 52%. So not a whole lot of change this week just yet, but pay attention. You never know. These moves just seem to come out of nowhere. And so that's what I'll be watching for. Wanted to bring that quick update, guys. Thanks for watching. We'll see you all in the next one. Take care, everyone.